everyone, happy rainy Monday morning, but happy second week of Lady Audley's Secret. This is when you're going to start finding out all of the secrets. So when I was chatting with the Thursday Zoom group about Lady Audley, I let them in on a little secret, which some of you may have discovered if you've read far enough, but there's more than just one secret in Lady Audley's Secret. In fact, I would say that there are three. And so it will be interesting to think about what do we think that the title of the book, which secret are they actually talking about? One of them, most of you have probably already figured out. One of them, which I think is in Lady Audley's mind, a secret that she's kept all her life, but we will find to be a strange secret. And then the last and final secret, I don't believe that many of you will realize until the very end of the novel. At least I haven't come across too many people who realize it. But I wanted to just kind of get your minds thinking and point out two passages. These actually come from a little bit earlier in the novel, so you're probably quite past them by now. But I also didn't want to be in danger of spoiling anything for people who weren't further along. So the first one comes from chapter 6. I believe it is volume 2. It's called George's Letters. It's a couple pages in. It's on page 227 if you have the broad view. And it's a small paragraph that starts with the word madhouses. Madhouses are large and only too numerous. Yet surely it is strange they are not larger. When we think of how many helpless wretches must beat their brains against this hopeless persistency of the orderly, outward world, as compared with the storm and tempest, the riot and confusion within. When we remember how many minds must tremble upon the narrow boundary between reason and unreason, mad today and sane tomorrow, mad yesterday and sane today. So this is an outright narrator comment. Narrator intrusion, we might say, and it's a very interesting way to get us to think about those blurred boundaries that I said was a key quality of a sensation novel. And here the narrator is asking us to think about that boundary between madness and sanity. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about madness and insanity if you haven't already gotten to that point in the novel. But I think this is a really early moment that's kind of alerting us to that quality of madness. But I also liked the first part of this passage that sort of says what's creating the madness is the outward world, right, which is sort of orderly. And one way that I read that is to mean it imposes sort of a set of restraints on us, right? It's been normalized. There are rituals and traditions and norms and ways of doing things, right? So that orderly outward world is constantly pressing on sort of the inside of us, right, as we're kind of struggling to figure out how do we fit in that world, and we seem perhaps not able to fit, and that creates kind of riot and confusion within. So a really interesting way of maybe thinking about some of the characters in the novel. So I want to draw your attention to that. And then the other one that I wanted you to think about, which is in I think it's just next chapter, chapter 7, Retrograde Investigation. It's almost near the end of the chapter. It's in a very long paragraph that starts, it's 242 in the broad view, but it starts, Lucy Audley looked up from her occupation amongst the fragile china cups. And Robert is in the room watching her. She knows he's there. But I want to look kind of midway through that paragraph. To do away with the tea table is to rob woman of her legitimate empire. To send a couple of hulking men about amongst your visitors, distributing a mixture made in the housekeeper's room, is to reduce the most social and friendly of ceremonies to a formal giving out of rations. Better the pretty influence of the teacups and saucers gracefully wielded in a woman's hand than all the inappropriate power snatched at the point of the pen from the unwilling, sterner sex. Imagine all the women of England elevated to the high level of masculine intellectuality, superior to crinoline, above pearl powder and Mrs. Rachel Levinson, above taking the pains to be pretty, above making themselves agreeable, above tea tables and that cruelly scandalous and rather satirical gossip which even strong men delight in. and what a dreary, utilitarian, ugly life the sterner sex must lead. So I'm going to leave you to just kind of puzzle over this passage, but I want to suggest to you that it shouldn't be read straight, that the narrator is being quite ironic here, and that it reveals sort of the gendered hypocrisy of how society evaluates what women do in their world and what men do in theirs, and then also how it divides them. So the narrator here is kind of pretending to imagine putting women in men's world and then kind of going, oh, how terrible would that be? But I think we can, if you go look at it closely, you can hear some of the irony that the narrator doesn't actually think it would be terrible for women to get to be intellectual and have pursuits. But that the narrator is sort of mocking that voice of society that is saying, oh, it would be terrible to have men serving tea and have women, have these intellectual conversations. So there's a lot of stuff happening with gender in this novel, and I think it's going to be really important to think about gender and class as you begin to hear more about Lady Audley's background. And the Engage activity for this week will ask you to sort of think about the different versions of the stories that we hear. And I think that Braddon is doing some really interesting things with her sort of villain of the story, Lady Audley, and getting us to kind of ponder, how did Lady Audley get into this predicament in the first place, and what might her culture's gender norms have to do with that. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you do on Wednesday.